Today, we're talking staples of stop motion. Wallace and Gromit. These two British cultural icons come from the creative minds over at Aardman Animation Studios, and their inception was both box office and actually quite humanitarian. You see, the creation of Wallace and Gromit coincides with fundraising for children's charities, becoming the mascots for Wallace and Gromit's Children Foundation and Wallace and Gromit's Grand Appeal for the Bristol Children's Hospital. Not only has Wallace and Gromit helped thousands, but is also a critically acclaimed short film franchise, winning 3 Oscars and claiming Best Animated Feature of 2006, being the first stop-motion film to ever be accredited the award. Now, to be quite frank with you, there's really only 2 main characters. Wallace, a cheese-obsessed inventor, and Gromit, the most loyal companion a human could ever have, and a great caretaker as well. And with that short little introduction, let's jump on in. Our first movie, A Grand Day Out, begins with Wallace and Gromit in their natural habitat, cozy and in their home. They appear to be searching for a fun place to go on holiday based on the many travel pamphlets that litter their living room. Wallace suggests a cup of tea, to which Gromit happily agrees. The only problem is their main accompaniment is missing: cheese. Wallace breaks the news to Gromit, and the two begin looking for a vacation location that has lots of cheese.
Cheese! We'll go somewhere where there's cheese.
They list some basic places like Philadelphia and Lancashire, until Wallace and Gromit get a brilliant idea at the exact same time: the moon. Wallace gets to work building a rocket, with Gromit helping in his own special way. That is unfortunate. Anyway, the two are eventually successful in creating their masterpiece, and both hop on towards the infinite land of cheese. Unfortunately, it's only until they light the fuse that would inevitably launch them that Wallace realizes they've forgotten the crackers. He races to retrieve them, nearly losing all of them on a sprint back. Thankfully, he's able to make it back onto the spacecraft before its grand launch. And just like that, the two are off, taking comfort in their homey-styled rocket until it's time for them to land. Once there, the two immediately set out to have a cheese-filled picnic, although neither of them can figure out what kind of cheese the moon is made out of, as it's unlike any cheese that they've ever tried. After deciding that they'd like to try a different part of the moon to see if the cheese is any different or recognizable, they run into a robot. At first, it looks like a cross between an oven and a parking meter. Wallace is confused by it too, and puts a dime into it, and that's what it seems will prompt it to come to life or begin working. He stands there for a bit, but ends up walking off in frustration. It's only until he's gone that the robot comes to life, and immediately gets frustrated at the trash left behind by Wallace and Gromit. It goes and picks it up, only to find a pamphlet for a skiing resort. The robot fantasizes about skiing the slopes, something it's never been able to do, as it lives on the cheese-filled moon. Eventually, the robot finds Wallace and Gromit, attacking Wallace with a bat because of his negligence to his home. Thankfully for Wallace, though, the robot ran out of juice, showing that the robot must be given coins in order to run, which is peculiar since he seems to be stranded on the moon. Since nobody visits the moon, he's essentially in a coma most of the time. Who put him there? I have so many questions. Anyway, Wallace puts another coin in him, not understanding the violent nature of the thing. The two head off to their rocket to take their leave, having retrieved a satisfying amount of cheese. The robot watches the two wander off, realizing that they must have used their rocket, and they're from Earth. The robot quickly attempts to become a stowaway, but is unable to climb their ladder due to him only having a couple small wheels. He ends up breaking into the engine area, hoping to catch a ride that way.
The fuse! You forgot to light the fuse!
But is unable to hold onto his body in space and is launched back onto the moon as they lift off. Sad and frustrated with itself, the robot throws a mini tantrum. During this, he gets the brilliant idea to use the parts that he was launched with to create his own skis. The movie ends with us watching the robot as he accomplishes his goal of skiing by using the cheese mounds on the moon. Presumably doing this until he goes back in hibernation for who knows how long. Poor guy. I kind of feel bad for him. Our next film, The Wrong Trousers, starts off with us finding out that it's Gromit's birthday. At first, he's a bit angsty as it seems like Wallace has forgotten, only until Wallace lets it slip that he spent a great deal of money on Gromit's birthday gifts.
And those presents weren't cheap either.
Pleasantly surprised, Gromit awaits his gifts but is unfortunately dissatisfied with the results. His first gift is a new collar, a red one with spikes on it, and his second gift is, well, walking trousers. They appear to be robotic legs that are capable of taking Gromit on walks by himself. Gromit is annoyed with Wallace and his gift choices, deciding to do his own thing while supposedly on a walk. Because of Wallace's lack of money, he ends up putting a sign outside for a room to let welcoming strangers into their home. In particular, one stranger, a little penguin. Instead of following Wallace to the room that he's supposed to be letting, he chooses Gromit's room. And since Wallace doesn't have a backbone, he lets him. Worst birthday ever, if you ask me. The two then decide to paint the spare bedroom to look like Gromit's room again. Gromit decides to use the trousers to allow him to walk on the ceiling, prompting the penguin to watch mysteriously. That night, and what appears to be several nights, the penguin doesn't shut off his ominous music, ever, causing Gromit to grow more and more irritated. Eventually, he tries to camp for himself by asking the penguin to turn off his music, only to find that the whole time the music was playing, the penguin wasn't even home. To make matters worse, the penguin begins doing all of the nice things that Gromit used to do for Wallace, making the penguin look really good and Gromit subpar. One night, Gromit even witnesses the penguin and Wallace having a wine-accompanied dinner without him. It's this night that he decides to officially run away. Penguin watches him go, putting his little arms together menacingly. He then gets to work on the walking trousers, preparing with his electric screwdriver to do some serious damage. The next day, when Wallace awakens, he's transported downstairs the way he always is, but instead of going into his normal trousers, he's put in the walking ones. With no way to get out, he's controlled to walk around and jump through the city, and yelling for Gromit the entire time as he assumes that it's his fault. Gromit is all on his lonesome though, looking for a new place to live, only to see that all of his options are dog-free. It's then that he lays his eyes on a wanted poster, displaying a penguin wearing what appears to be a rooster hat. This bewilders Gromit as the penguin in the poster is very similar to the penguin that had infiltrated his house. After staring at the poster, Gromit finally notices Wallace's yells for help, confused as to how he's doing what he's doing, till he notices the penguin with a remote controller. Gromit does some investigating and finds the penguin measuring the size of a window, and the length to get to the window. He then breaks into the penguin's room, only to find his plans for breaking into the bank, where a large diamond is located. Gromit then hears the penguin return home in order to not get caught snooping. He hides under Wallace's covers, who's been passed out since his very eventful morning. Soon after, Wallace is ordered to get out of bed while still passed out, and is taken all the way to the bank, where he infiltrates through a vent at the top of the building. He's remotely controlled and almost makes it out with the diamond, but ends up hitting one of the security lasers before he's home free. The penguin thinks quickly, and has Wallace exit through the window, trying his best not to get caught. Once back at the house, the penguin thinks he's home free, only to be reprimanded by Gromit, during which the penguin pulls out a gun. Jeez. Kind of an over-escalation there.
All yours, Gromit.
Gromit doesn't stop until the penguin is completely encapsulated in a glass bottle, finally putting their minds at ease now that he's been immobilized. Wallace and Gromit turn the penguin in, rewarding themselves the prize money, and enjoying their calm little lifestyle without a criminal living amongst them. Our next movie, A Close Shave, begins with us meeting Shaun the sheep for the first time. He's mysteriously dropped off by a creepy van late at night. A lady with a bob haircut and a larger dog are seen driving it. The next morning, Wallace and Gromit awaken to find most of their things have been chewed through. They look for the culprit and settle for blaming the mice before being called for a window cleaning job across town. The two head out on their journey to make some extra cash. Once there, Wallace lays on a beautiful girl knitting at the front desk. She's shown to have the same bob. Her dog is seen as well, weirdly lurking in the shadows.
All right, Pooch.
Wallace awkwardly tries to talk to her, but she ends up dropping a bunch of wool onto the floor, showing the audience that not only is she the culprit, but she's also in the knitting industry. How heinous. Oblivious. Wallace brings up the wool rustling that's been going on around town. Apparently, there have been people capturing sheep and killing them for their wool. Strangely enough, the woman doesn't say much of anything about that at all, and instead prompts him to leave. Once home, the two find Shaun the sheep eating everything in their kitchen. They wash him up, accidentally cutting his hair, and creating a cute little sweater in the process. The next day at the shop, Gromit is photographed with Shaun, looking as though he's about to butcher him. The woman's dog ends up using that photo to frame Gromit for the sheep rustling, landing him in prison for life. Shaun, a pack of sheep, and Wallace break him out of jail, and an epic chase scene commences. Not with the feds, but with the woman's dog. He ends up turning on his owner along with the rest of the sheep, leaving her to be killed along with the rest of them. Gromit proceeds to save the day, as usual, saving everybody and attempting to get rid of the evil dog. During this, the woman drops a massive information bomb, letting them know that he's not a normal dog, but rather a cyborg dog.
It's a cyber dog.
Cyborg? What?
A robot.
He was created by her father in order to protect her, but he's gone bad. He breaks out of the shaving machine, and they're forced to reprimand him yet again. While he ends up getting severely injured in the process, the day is officially saved. The woman visits Wallace at the end of the film, to which he's grateful. He invites her in for some cheese, to which she proclaims that cheese makes her rashy, so she unfortunately can't. Wallace is in disbelief, realizing that she just isn't the person for him, since she can't partake in his favorite activity, eating cheese. Our next film is very, very special, in the sense that it's partnered with DreamWorks. This was my personal favorite when I was a kid, and this was my introduction to Wallace and Gromit. Without further ado, I present to you The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. It begins with the POV of a small creature looking to somebody's garden. An alarm goes off, alerting both Wallace and Gromit of the garden invasion. The two get dressed and head out to scope the scene, successfully capturing a small rabbit trying to steal a prized pumpkin. The two are celebrated throughout the town for successfully solving the ongoing pest problem, but Gromit is a tad bit annoyed since after they capture the rabbits, they just keep them all in their basement as pets. And as per usual, Gromit is the one who ends up having to take care of everything. When Wallace wakes up for breakfast, it's shown that he's gotten chubbier than normal. Gromit feeds him rabbit food for breakfast since he's supposed to be going on a diet. Wallace pretends to eat it, but sends Gromit outside to see how his baby is doing, a large watermelon. While he's outside, he attempts to have some of his secret cheese, but is caught red-handed. Literally, after his hand gets caught in a mousetrap. Wallace confronts Gromit about his contraption and explains to him that if he's going to be losing weight, he'd rather do it in his own way, through mind control. Gromit is understandably wary of this, as they've never made an invention such as that before. But before he's able to fire it up, he gets a call from Mrs. Talkington, who appears to be an upscale socialite, and a beautiful one at that. Wallace is incredibly excited about the call, even though it was in regards to a rabbit infestation. Once the call is over, Mrs. Talkington gets a knock at the door, and is greeted by Victor, a lover with flowers. He tells Mrs. Talkington that he's there to fix the pest problem, and that to her dismay, pulls out a shotgun. Turns out he's not here for rabbits at all. He's not even really in love with her, he just wants her family's fortune. Scumbag. Anyway, back to the film. Wallace and Gromit are successful in capturing all the rabbits in their own humane way. They used a large tube and capsule in order to suck all the bunnies through their tunnel system. During this, they also humiliate Victor in front of Lady Talkington as he ends up getting his toupee ripped off and almost sucked into the machine as well. Lady Talkington is incredibly impressed by Wallace, and we can tell that she really likes him. Victor, upset about the whole situation, leaves with a bunny on his head thinking that it's his fallen toupee.
We take check or cash?
Toupee, you idiot!
Once home, Wallace has an idea that could potentially solve Gromit's own infestation that has taken up their entire basement. He wants to use the mind-controlling device on the rabbits, so they don't have the urge to eat everything in their sight. His idea goes horribly wrong. Wallace and a bunny somehow get trapped inside the mind wave machine. Gromit is able to break the mind machine to save Wallace, and he appears to be fine. The rabbit, on the other hand, seems extremely distressed, not wanting a carrot, but also not making eye contact with anybody and shaking a little bit. Aw, disturbed little buddy. Later that night, that same rabbit broke out of his cage and rummaged through the entire town. The local newspaper described it as mass vegetable carnage. Wallace is incredibly distraught, and the two of them attend the town meeting addressing the situation at large. The town is not happy whatsoever, and they blame Wallace and Gromit for not being able to protect them from the pests throughout the town. During their debacle, one of the survivors of the night barges in and proclaims that the creature that killed all their gardens is actually a were-rabbit. Dun dun dun! Victor barges in and tells the town that he'll easily be able to shoot the beast. Lady Talkington negates his ideas though, not wanting the animals to be harmed. She announces that she, along with the rest of the town, will be trusting in Wallace and Gromit yet again, in order for them to reclaim the hearts of the town. That night, while on watch, Gromit goes on a wild chase, and ends up tearing up many more gardens. His chase leads him back to their house with muddy footsteps, leading down to their basement. Wallace and Gromit go downstairs, only to find that the experiment they tried to conduct earlier in the episode did, in fact, cause all of the commotion that's been occurring throughout the town. Wallace excitedly tells Gromit to lock up the rabbit, while he goes and breaks the good news to Lady Talkington. Part 3000 of Wallace leaving Gromit to do all the dirty work just so he can go talk to a lady. While there, he slowly begins acting more animalistic, eating flowers and looking a bit too hungry at all of Lady Talkington's vegetables.
He's never shown any interest in my produce.
Oh, his loss, Lady Tottington.
Before he can get too crazy, Gromit splashes him with water as he had followed Wallace to the house in order to keep an eye on him. While driving home, the two of them are interrupted by Victor, who begins yelling at Wallace and accusing him of being the pest in order to get closer to Lady Talkington. In the quarrel, Wallace does end up transforming into a massive bunny, throwing Victor and running away. Victor goes to the local, who had been attacked the first day, for information about the beast.
Nun wrestling. No, I meant this one.
And he learns that the only way to kill the beast is by using a golden bullet, a play on the common tale of silver bullets killing werewolves. That next morning, Gromit wakes Wallace up, only for the two of them to find Wallace's new accessory, bunny ears. The two freak out, and eventually come to the conclusion that they need to check on the bunny that Wallace had a moment with earlier. only to find that the bunny has slowly been turning into a humanoid, much like Wallace. The next day, Lady Talkington is told that the beast is still on the loose and has not been taken care of by Wallace, so she sadly has to accept Victor's help in shooting it instead. She ends up driving to Wallace's house to tell him the news, being very distraught while doing so. The second that she leaves, Victor storms the house, attacking the two boys. Eventually, he's able to shoot the beast, only to find that he shot the female bunny costume instead. Regardless, the town rejoices, oblivious to what has actually happened. The giant vegetable celebration begins in full force, with Wallace only showing up towards the end, grabbing Lady Talkington and running away. He does his little arm wave at her, and she realizes that the were-bunny is actually Wallace. She proclaims her undying protection and proceeds to shield him from Victor. When he shows up, he accidentally reveals that he knows who the were-bunny is. He's just been trying to get him out of the picture so he doesn't have to have any competition for Lady Talkington. After hearing this, she sprays him with pansy spray and instructs Wallace to run away. An epic chase scene ensues, with Gromit, being the wonderful wingman that he is, still trying to protect Wallace at all costs. He sacrifices his plane, allowing himself to fall for Wallace to survive. Wallace leaps down to hug Gromit and protect him from the crash. At first, Wallace is assumed to be dead, only to find that he's fine.
Party!
Wallace, you're in here.
Oh, whoops. Oh.
The film ends with Lady Talkington opening up her very own rabbit sanctuary outside, successfully dumping Victor, and setting her sights on a better man. Or should I say, better bunny. Our last film, A Matter of Loaf and Death, begins with us witnessing a baker getting murdered. This series never ceases to amaze me with just the darkness hidden within it. The next morning, Gromit shudders while reading the morning paper while also wearing a baking hat. Apparently, he and Wallace have decided to begin their own bakery, with Wallace being distraught but also happy, as the less bakers that are around, the more business the two should be getting. Harsh. The two head off for the day.
Target.
Only to witness a damsel in distress, Pyla, and her dog Fluffles. Wallace and Gromit are instantly mesmerized, officially meeting them after rescuing them from sudden death. Later that day, after Wallace gets back to his home, Pyla shows up to ask Wallace on a date. The two actually go on several, much to Gromit's dismay. After only briefly dating Pyla, she brings in a bunch of her own things, making the place like her own and completely ruining their boyish vibe. Before Gromit can completely lose his mind, Fluffles knocks on the door, supposedly trying to move into his room with him. Before they can spend too much time, Pyla decides that it's time to leave, but accidentally leaves her purse. Wallace sends Gromit to give it back to her since it's raining super hard and he doesn't want to leave. Once at her place, Gromit instantly becomes suspicious as she lives in a strange mansion-like house. She ends up wandering upstairs, only to find a bunch of numbered mannequins, all with bakers' uniforms on them. He then opens up a notebook with pictures of all the different bakers with red X's on them, revealing the Pyla is the baker murderer, and Wallace is next. Gromit escapes just in time, but ends up spending the night on her chandelier. In the morning, he races out of the house with their book, attempting to warn Wallace. But when he tries to tell him, he's interrupted by Pyla announcing their engagement. Till death do us part. Gromit goes on the defensive, getting rid of every single dangerous item in the house. When trying to protect Wallace from potentially poisoned soup, Pyla bites her own arm and blames it on Gromit in order to get him out of the way so that she can make her move. After attempting to push Wallace off of a very high ledge and failing due to a thought of flour slamming into her, Pyla has a temper tantrum, throwing her ring at Wallace and calling him a fruitcake. Distraught, Wallace talks to Gromit. But while the two are having tea, Pyla comes back yet again, this time with a present, telling Wallace that she's there to make it up to him, and that she'd like to get back together. The entire time she's there, Gromit notices that Fluffles isn't. Upon hearing from Pyla that she supposedly doesn't feel well, Gromit decides to sneak into Pyla's house to check up on Fluffles himself. Once there, he gets caught and thrown into a broom closet with Fluffles, but not before Pyla lets Gromit know that soon Wallace will be having the most explosive time of his life. The film then cuts to Wallace awaiting Gromit in front of his cake, a large shape resembling that of a bomb. Wallace inevitably becomes aware of the situation whenever Pyla reveals her true intentions, and he opens up the cake to find what is in fact a very large bomb. Him, along with Pyla and Fluffles, attempt to get rid of the bomb, but to no avail.
Anyone seen the bomb?
The bomb ends up getting stuck in Wallace's pants, and with no time left, Gromit stuffs his pants with a bunch of dough in order to soften the blast. After a full-on Wallace cheek shot, Pyla tries to escape by using the hot air balloon, but she ends up being too heavy for it. landing herself in the crocodile exhibit and the zoo, and being eaten alive. Our story ends with Fluffles joining Wallace and Gromit on their next adventure, delivering bread throughout the town. Now, we mentioned that Wallace is an inventor, but there are really only two inventions we saw here: the mind control device and the bunny vacuum, and those clearly didn't pan out too well in the long run. But what about the others? Well, the Wallace and Gromit franchise includes Wallace and Gromit's Cracking Contraptions, a mini-series dedicated to new inventions that Wallace creates in order to make the two of their lives easier. Now, I will say, these inventions typically don't work in the ways in which they were originally intended, as they would backfire and never be used again. Wallace and Gromit have proven to be incredibly intelligent, but that doesn't mean that all their inventions come out perfect right out of the gate. Some notable inventions include the Shopper 13, a machine dedicated to going to the store and specifically buying cheese for Wallace, as he's proven to be the world's biggest cheese fan and must have cheese on standby at all times, especially considering that the last time he ran out of cheese, he took a trip to the moon in order to thoroughly stock up. The Bully-Proof Vest, that protects the wearer from bullies by socking them in the face. The Turbo Dinner, that helps them pick up dinner faster, as neither of the boys enjoy cleaning up after a full belly. And a Sock-O-Matic that helps them practice football. This is it's a British franchise, so. And on that note, we end the famous Wallace and Gromit franchise. Go and leave a comment on which Wallace's love interest was your favorite. I'm personally Team Lady Talkington, since she's one of the only ones who didn't try to murder him, so, Thank you all for watching. Like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content just like this in the future. We'll see you next time. See ya.